Hi. I made some more samples with water bears in them. Um, in this case, just some sticks that I collected from a local wetland, sort of a forested area around the wetland. And found some water bears and rotifers, the sort of normal things that we've been finding in the lichen. They're just really starting to wake up right now, so this little rotifer is not quite hydrated yet. Um, I took this sample just a little bit ago and put it into some water, and it's basically just some stick scrapings that I made. And same way I always do, scrape a little bit of the stick off the lichen material, basically into a small bowl, and add a little bit of pure water to it. And from there, I just put it on a microscope slide. This one doesn't even have a cover slip on it. And so I've just been watching them kind of wake up. I wanted to try to find one that was still sort of coming out of its cryptobiotic state for you, to sort of catch it in the act of coming out of that sort of state. But that's a very fat bear. Oh, that's actually just a rotifer that you're looking at, but the bear is up here. Here it is. There it is. And tried to get them as they were sort of coming out of their cryptobiotic state. This one's sort of clinging on to something. There were two of them that were like right next to each other, and they were sort of seems well fed. Yeah, it probably was, Anna. And I sent you, by the way, on a couple of sticks from, I think they're from a park, but I had tested part of it on a different stick that was like right next to it that was the same kind of material. And the ones I sent you were just covered with lichen. So I'm pretty sure that they'll have plenty of these little water bears in them. Maybe not these kind, but I have a tracking number somewhere. I just I sent it to, like, sort of the slowest rate because it's a stick, and I didn't think it was that critical that it get to you immediately. It's just been sitting around in a field, so it's probably not going to degrade or anything on the trip out to Idaho. So yeah, there's one big boy right here, and another one that was basically the same kind was sort of sitting right next to it. You can see its little snout is sticking out. And I thought, oh, I'll just grab my camera and get it set up, and maybe they'll still be in their little sort of sleepy state by the time I start my stream. But actually, that sort of speaks to how fast they can come out of that state, because in a matter of really like the 5 minutes or so that it took me to get everything set up, when I came back to the microscope, they were already out of the field of view. So there's a little rotifer right there, spinning around. The rotifers were also sort of coming out of their cryptobiotic state still. Really, the samples were in water for less than maybe 10 minutes, because it takes me a little while to get the microphone and get my camera hooked up and get the software for streaming sort of connected to have them all together there, and to change the other stuff. Hey, little Chook and Dello. Do I know how to keep them fat and well fed long term? Not really. I've been sort of scraping sticks for a while now as I find them, and pulling some water bear samples from basically all of them. And then a lot of times I just sort of chuck the sticks back out into nature when I'm done with the little bit that I have. But I've been sort of accumulating a dry mass. That's this part right here. That's got, it's probably got a bunch of water bear and rotifers that are all dried up in it. And presumably because they eat algae and other organisms, that the nematodes and other things that are in them will probably sustain them. But I mean, most of the time they're in their cryptobiotic state. So I don't know how frequently is a good idea to get them wet and wake them back up. So what's that? There's a little tiny water bear right there, a little baby one, or a different species that's just smaller maybe. He's crawling around. You can see his face now. Let's see. I can fix this. Let me fix it. Let's see. That's too big. That's the wrong gizmo. I want the... Let's see. If I hit it again. Zoom out a little bit. There you go. Now you can see what I see a little bit better. He's crawling around. Right there. This little stick that he's on is moving around, so he's sort of moved off of the screen a bit. Yeah, it's sort of drifting as he crawls around on it. So I don't know how frequently you should, like re-wet them, get them back into sort of an active state. The ones that I had, I tried to keep the sort of material wet for several days in a row. And what I found is that after a while, the water bears and... Ooh, what's going on here? There's that water bear, and maybe another one behind it. But after... it was just a really big one. After about a week, I would come back and I would put the water bears on a slide, and they would be, for the most part, inactive, even with the water. Even with the sort of water part always wet, so that they weren't ever dried out. They were just sort of laying around, and I don't know if they sleep or they only can be active for so many days in a row before they kind of slow down. Didn't really do any research on it. I don't think they were dead. I don't think staying alive that long caused them to perish or anything, but because there still seemed like there was plenty of food with respect to, there's this green stuff all around. This little bit of lichen was everywhere. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what they eat most of the time. And yeah, so I don't know. Not sure exactly like how long to keep them that way. And then, if you dry them out, how long before you should re-wet it. But I suspect there's just food everywhere in here. They wouldn't be living there if it wasn't a good environment for them. And probably in nature they just wake up for, however long a stick is wet, so 2 or 3 days, and then probably they go back into sort of a torpor state or take a nap. I don't know. I didn't think that they were dead, though, and the reason that I didn't think they were dead is that I ultimately decided to dry the slides back out, and when I dried the slides back out, they... Oh, here's some more. There's a rotifer. And another rotifer. We're in like a little rotifer village here. Um, yeah, so they rolled back up into little balls after I dried them out. So I don't think they do that if they're dead. I think that if they die, they're not gonna have a way of like a mechanism for rolling back up. Although maybe it's sort of autonomic. Maybe they just do it. Um, I didn't try to get them wet. Then after that, I just sort of chucked all the stuff out because I didn't want to. If I was killing them, I didn't want to kill them. So I moved them out into the yard, which is, I suppose, where I'm growing a whole bunch of water bears right now. Anyway, because they're on the sticks out there. So, but I have sort of like a pile of leaves next to the house, and they sort of went into there, so I figured they'd be fine, at least for a little while. I mean, they were back in their ton states, so. No, I saw more water bears in here. Just seen like 3 of them so far. But part of the reason I wanted to sort of hop on tonight and do a little bit of water bear streaming was because, oops, that's a rotifer out in the open. So you can see it crawling around and its little foot right there, and its little antenna, and then a little corona sort of sweepery mustache things. Let's see. Oh, hi, Dangling. Dell and I decided to call a group of tardigrades a squish. A squish of tardigrades. Yeah. Well, there's, every time I just grab a stick and I do some of this sort of scraping, I would say that I usually get, when I pipette it up onto my slide, maybe 3. I mean, they're not super dense in that environment. If they were really dense in the environment, I'd see dozens of them in a sample because I'm concentrating it somewhat. But they're probably at some appropriate concentration relative to the amount of food available and moisture available. So I don't know what that is. There's a rotifer. They got those long, stretchy bodies and just 1 foot on the back end that they use to kind of hop around with. And anyway, so part of the reason I wanted to stream was, one, I had found some sticks, and you can really see the little spinning rotifer elements right there for a couple of seconds. Yeah, he's got them out right there. So let's see if we can get him to, oops. Let's see. He's kind of tucked away right in there. There's 2 of them, it looks like. There's another one on the back side of that chunk of debris. They're kind of fighting for space. Yep. So also, oh, maybe the one in the background is actually something else. No, that's definitely a rotifer. Normally on Tuesday nights, I try to like squeeze in a stream from home. I would say maybe like every other Tuesday night, really. It's not that frequent. But also this month, A Tiny World, who's one of our fellow microscope streamers, is not going to be streaming. So, and she normally brings some water bears from her back patio. And on Monday, I did an interview with The Tiny World and her for her podcast. And I thought, oh, maybe I can just sort of fill in a little bit for her. She's way more knowledgeable about water bears than I am. But Maybe if somebody needs a fix, they can come check out some of the water bears that we have here in these lichen samples, and also some of these rotifers that we have crawling around in here. And, I can just sort of fill in for a little bit. So back to these guys. Here's the big one that we saw earlier, kicking around. And I'm just going to leave it there for a little bit. I might zoom back out because we're crazy zoomed in. And yeah, so I thought, oh, well, maybe I can just sort of give people a little bit of water bear action. And also I sent, so I sent my friend Anna some sticks, as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream. And also I sent Dell Maximum a little stick. Is that a DSLR? The camera that I use is an Olympus OMD EM. This is an EM1 Mark II, which is a micro four thirds format. So it's not like a typical DSLR, but it's a digital camera stuck on the top of there. Yeah. So the screen for the DSLR you can kind of see up here folds out on mine, which is nice because it folds back onto the back and also can let me see what's going on there. And then I can just zoom in on it digitally pretty easily, which is nice because it allows me to kind of control how much of the screen you can see at one time. And you can see that I have a little C-mount adapter that hooks it up to the microscope. It's just a little piece of metal that basically screws in, and then the image comes straight from the objective up through this trinocular mount into a little lens and a camera adapter. And that camera adapter is actually designed to fit this thing, which is the Leica digital camera that comes with this Leica microscope when you buy it. But this thing has a 5 megapixel sensor and a pretty slow processor. It's used for taking still photos, whereas my EM1 here has a 20 megapixel sensor and a really, really powerful processor. So it can do 4K video, for example. And I just thought it looks a lot better than the other one, especially because we do a lot of color live video. If I'm taking pictures of diatoms, I think it probably would still do a better job. But I think this is acceptable for that. If I wanted to get something live with organisms moving around, I think this does a much better job of sort of showcasing them. So how could you find some of these? I have my own microscope, and I feel like this would be really fun to do. So yeah, that Leica is super pricey. This is a lab research grade microscope, so you're not going to be able to afford one of these just off the street, and I probably couldn't afford one off the street if I were just buying it. The expensive part of this microscope is actually things that you can't see, which is that these objectives have differential interference contrast, and so I think you could probably buy it without that for something like $12,000 or $15,000. I mean, it's like a car, right? And then with the fancy software that we have, and the camera mount at the top, and this one's got filters on the bottom. I can sort of flip the filters around, and the differential interference contrast and phase contrast filters, which we use mostly for diatom stuff. I think this one costs something like $28,000. So that's the total thing with the computer and the software and everything else. Hey, commentator. There's no diatoms in the image that we have here. So the question from Little Boy is actually, how could you find some? And the answer is you just need sticks. Really, I don't think that. I think once I started looking for old sticks with a little bit of lichen on them that had fallen off of the trees, I've been able to find pretty much every stick that I've looked at has had water bears and rotifers and nematode worms in them. And all I did for these is I just took a little paring knife, and you can see the little sort of part that I scraped off. That's not for the sample that we're looking at. The sample that we're looking at is actually from a stick that's over there on my couch. But I just scraped a little bit of the lichen part off into a little glass bowl, and then I added some water. And I think it's really critical. Hey, Mama Bonbon, if you're going to add water to it, that you don't add tap water that's been chlorinated, because I think chlorination probably would kill both the rotifers and the water bear. Maybe not right away, but I think they probably would not manage it very well. So there's this little combination rotifer water bear right there for you, and then just wait 30 seconds and put a sample on a microscope slide, and that's it. Does that thing have a foot and a finger? That's what it looks like to you. So if you mean the thing at the bottom, the rotifer has a foot with a little 3-pronged or 2-pronged claw on the end of it. Let me see if I can get a good image of it. And then it's got like just a column-shaped body that it's sort of rising in and out of. And then at the top, a sort of little antenna. And then it's got these really cool mouth parts that sort of sit inside its head. And when it starts to feed, they flip out, and little cilia on them cause the water that's around them. These things are called corona. And they basically come out and sort of move back and forth, and it pulls the water in towards their mouth. So they do have like a foot, like a 3 little clawed foot that they use to grab onto stuff. And the water bears themselves have claws. So they have 8 feet, and on each one of the ends of each one of the feet, they have sets of claws that are sort of curl shaped, and they can use them to grasp stuff. And the ones in the back are only used for grasping. You can sort of see that moves like a caterpillar, kind of, with the front 6 legs sort of clambering around, or I don't know, they look like a little baby that's been turned over, like having a hard time flipping itself back over. And then the back 2 feet sort of work together, and they just grab and clasp stuff and allow them to kind of use the front arms to move their self around. So, but they actually have claws on the ends of their feet. So each one of their individual feet have sets of claws on them, and if they weren't kicking around quite so much, you probably would be able to see them pretty easily. Let's see if I can kind of get in close and showcase that for you. So it's going to be hard because they're always crawling around, and when I get zoomed in, their sort of 3-dimensional nature starts to stand out, but you can really see their legs sort of kicking right there. And then, of course, their mouth has a little snout, little newt snout, and you can see at the ends of each one of those little legs, hopefully, some sort of claw-like structures. The back legs, so you could see them there for a second. And working on my fine motor skills here, trying to get both focus and movement as we're moving around. But you can sort of see its claws right on the ends of some of its feet right there. And they're sort of translucent or transparent. But they never stop moving, and unless they're kind of sleeping. And then their mouths have sort of little phalangeal ridges on the insides of them. They use them to kind of scrape algae into their mouths. You can kind of see the claws real well there, the ends of each one of their feet. And yeah, they move around kind of like a caterpillar, but of course caterpillars don't just have 8 legs. Caterpillars have many, many legs. And they have little caterpillars have little sort of suction cup things at the ends of their feet, little graspy suction cups, but they don't actually have, typically they don't have claws, although I think there are some that actually do have claws. Hey, S. Kraus, thank you for the follow. Cows? Cows. Scouse? Scouse. Whatever. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it super well. Thank you for the follow. I really appreciate that. So, yeah, they just kind of clamber around like this. They look sort of helpless and, you know, like a sleeping bag that can crawl around on its own, basically, or a vacuum cleaner bag, maybe, with a little vacuum cleaner attachment at the front end of it. Oh, you want me to zoom in on the other one? Sure, I can do that. Hi, Anakin Luke. How you doing? Did I miss a comment? We have some 3D scanners that cost a lot more money than my car. Yeah, well, I have an SEM, and it costs roughly equivalent to how much my house costs. So, and yeah. So can I scroll in on this one? Yeah, there's lots of these rotifers in the sample, and I can zoom in a little bit on them. Again, they kind of like to hide under and around things. So it has a little sort of, it's not a hand or a finger. That thing that's coming off the top of its head is called an antenna. And I don't really know what they use the antenna for, probably trying to sense their environments. And then you can see this one's got sort of striations on its midsection right there. Yeah, that's a rotifer. And you can really see the antenna quite well right there. And you can see how they kind of clamber around. And then on the back end, they just have one little foot. You know, it's again, they're kind of like a sleeping bag, basically, with like one little claw at the end. Sylvia is not feeling well. She's upstairs. She's here, but she's not probably not going to come on the stream. She's been laying down and kind of playing with her friends most of the day, I think. So we can look around a little bit. I sort of know where this guy is, so we can maybe try to find that other little guy that was crawling around in here. I know there's at least one more water bear that's fairly close to here, because when I started, there was two of them that were right next to each other. They're little, in their little cryptobiotic state, their ton states, and they were just sort of sitting there, kind of rehydrating. That one is sitting, unfortunately, on a bubble, so I can't even get it in focus at all. I probably could get an even better image if I put a cover slip on. I've been running the light microscopes when I do the water bear stuff with no cover slip, partly to give them a more sort of natural environment, but also because, you know, you put a lot of pressure on them when you put a cover slip on the top, but also I think every once in a while maybe I'll find one that's dead or a molt, and then I could potentially sort of scoop it up and put it on a little cover slip and put that on the SEM so that we could actually look at them in the scanning electron microscope rather than the light microscope. So tomorrow we're going to do a little stream from the scanning electron microscope. I think that Mallory has decided that we're going to look at like spices, food things in the scanning electron microscope, which is funny because, oh, here's another one. That's a big guy too. That's a different one than the one that we saw before. It's in a totally different place. Maybe? Pretty big guy, again. And you can kind of see that they will clamber around on this stuff, and then that algae that's in the lichen is part of what they eat, I think. So, does it use its mouth to pull itself up? I think it mostly uses its foot, but it sometimes will grasp, or seems like it's grasping on with its mouth a little bit. Mind of a Snail, hello, how are you doing? I should send shout-outs. I'm really terrible about trying to do stuff while I'm streaming from home because I usually have people to help me. And, you know, so typing isn't really what I'm aiming for. in this setting. But I'll send a little shout out to Mind of a Snail, and I'll send a little shout out to Little Chook. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. And two of our regular visitors that come to the stream. And can you get a refund? Let's see. Yeah, I'm sure Sylvia will be okay. I thought we were going to play Minecraft a little bit earlier, but I don't think that she's up for it. So I thought maybe I would do a little streaming, and then, maybe I'll have an evening where I can just screw around and do whatever I want for once. Are rotifers and tardigrades friends? Do they play together or do they avoid each other? In what I've seen, they mostly just kind of. Oh, so you can really see the claw right there. Oops, I missed an opportunity to showcase that little claw. You see how it has two little sort of parts to it that stick out? Oops, I've lost it because of the size, but you can kind of see the claws on the back end of it that it's using to sort of pull itself around. It is kind of grabbing on with its mouth and then yanking itself forward. On that one little back foot, it's got basically two little claws and maybe a third one that it uses to kind of pinch with. But I don't know if they're friends. They don't seem to bother each other much, and I've never seen either one attack the other one, so I don't think that they're enemies. One stream about, I don't know, a month ago or something, I did see a water bear sort of attacking a nematode. I think it was a dead nematode, but it had most of the nematode in its mouth and was kind of like sucking out its insides. So I think it was a dead nematode, and I think it was just sort of scavenging it, which was kind of cool. There's our water bear. And maybe a giant rotifer in there, or maybe that's another water bear. I think it's a rotifer. But it had the whole thing basically in its mouth. It was trying to like slurp it down, and it ended up spitting it back out. But I think it had taken all of the good parts out of it by that point. So I thought that was kind of neat, because I'd never seen one sort of interacting with a nematode before. And it looked like it was kind of hunting them or chasing them around the screen quite a bit. After it came out of its mouth. But the rotifers and the water bears, I've never seen them actually sort of interact with each other, then kind of like bumble across each other. So I don't know that they're necessarily enemies or friends. I guess I like to think of them as being friends. They're in the same environment a lot. They're probably not competing for nutrients, because the rotifers tend to be filter feeders. So they have that sort of swirling mouth parts that pull stuff in towards their mouth, and most of it sort of just gets drawn in from wherever, and then they consume it or reject it. Whereas the water bears tend to be sort of scrapers, or whatever, predators. So they tend to sort of crawl around and then grab stuff. Oh, did you want a drawing? Is that what happened? You know what? I can give you a drawing. I can't do it on screen though, but I'll do a drawing for you. Tomorrow we're streaming from the scanning electron microscope at our normal time for Wednesdays, which is 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And I think it'll just be me and my lovely lab assistant, Mallory. And as I mentioned, I think we're going to look at like salt and peppercorns and things that you use for cooking, because that's what she wanted. And unless I can find something cool. I might go looking around in the backyard and see if I can scavenge up a roly-poly, because somebody asked me to do that once, and I still haven't gotten around to putting one of them on there. So, electric autistic, hello, how are you? Um, uh, you thought I looked at snails? Oh, you thought Mind of Snails looked at snails. We could probably put a snail on the SEM. I'd also have to find one of those. Sometimes you actually become snails. Let's see. Hype it up, yeah. Salt, spices aren't cool. Well, I don't know. I They could be. I mean, salt's just a mineral, so I know what it's going to look like in advance. Sugar, I have a pretty good idea what it's going to look like in advance. Minded snail. I am curious to know if these little dudes make sounds while eating, while moving. Do you know of anyone trying to mic them? I don't. They're underwater when they're active, so you know, I don't know how you would mic it. I bet they make a noise because they're articulating. You know, our idea of the noise that they make, at least the water bears, is newt newt, which is why we always go newt newt when we, I guess, welcome people to us, to the stream, and that's because we think that's the noise they make, like a newt newt sound. But who knows what noises they make? I bet it would be pretty interesting. I don't know that anybody's really looked closely at like microscopic organisms to hear what they sound like. I don't know that they probably don't have tools to vocalize, like truly vocalize, but I wouldn't guarantee against that. You know, they've got claws with feet with little claws on the end, so who knows what kind of things that could be going on. I don't know how do you mic something that's that small? I mean, how do you mic a microscopic organism? It would be a really interesting question to try to solve. The acoustics are probably kind of crazy, but like if you're asking, not like we would ever hear them, of course, but maybe they can hear each other. Yeah, I mean, like maybe they can hear, oh, there's something next to me making noises that I recognize. Stay away from it, or go towards it, I guess, if you're looking for food. So maybe there's a value in knowing the noises that they make. It'd be pretty easy to isolate them. So, I mean, you could at least do that pretty easily, and then maybe use that to help inform you. But I don't know how you get the microphone to pick up those sorts of vibrations. Maybe you have to use some sort of specialized microphone that's just attached to the glass or something. Because sound is just basically vibration. So it seems like you ought to be able to tell what that would sound like, sort of. It's kind of a pretty crazy idea to think about. But I like crazy ideas sometimes. Those are fun to sort of think through. Newton. Oh, you asked for a roly-poly. Okay, dangling. A tiny mic. Well, I mean, it seems like somebody must be thinking about how do you record little things. I know that what's this? Is a little rotifer? Yeah. They sometimes can record the little sounds that insects make when they're crawling around. Maybe they're just fabricated noises, but I always thought maybe they were real. When you watch, like, nature specials, they somehow have noises for those organisms. Then I don't know how they're recording those sounds. Oh, you can see that one had its little corona out and was spinning for a bit. Oop. Little rotifer. I feel like maybe they need to be one click out, like that maybe, so we could actually see them without them constantly being off of the screen. I could, of course, well, of course, the SEM won't work very well at Mama Bonbon because things are usually dead in the SEM. So I could also zoom in. I have higher powered. This is actually the lowest powered objective on this microscope. But the problem is the higher the power you get, the smaller the working distance gets, and also the less depth of field that you have. So those are just normal sort of photographic concepts. When you get closer to something, the depth of field shrinks. And so as a result, I could get it bigger, but then more of it would be out of focus and it would be harder to sort of showcase it. So what I've been doing is just leaving it at 100x and then just zooming in digitally. So it's got the depth of field, but it's just bigger. And I think that actually works pretty well. Yeah, I use the SEM to search for hearing sensors, though. Yeah, I don't know how you tell what's a hearing sensor. It's hard to tell sometimes. You want a drawing of an SEM? I mean, they just look like a computer mostly, but I can do it. It might not be the greatest sketch. Oh, is it choppy? What's it say on my end? I don't see the little doodad that tells me what's going on. I might be able to... Oh, I probably can't do it while it's running. I can probably lower the resolution a little bit, but it could just be that Sylvia's upstairs
Good news, everyone.
Watching videos or something. All right, thanks for the follow. That's Mile. Yeah, I think that's part of the issue is that if you're watching it at the output on my end is very high resolution, and a lot of times I turn it down when we're playing video games or something like that, so it could be that it just can't handle the output, and I just forget to do it every time, but you know, I guess I'm a purist, and I want the quality to be the highest quality possible for people who can have it, and I tend to forget about the fact that that makes it crappy for people who don't have high quality. So, oh, I meant to check as well. I should look. Oh, let's see if I do this. Is this working? Oh, it is. The closed captioning's working. Good. I wasn't sure if that would work. I had it working once and then I forgot to turn it on the next time I streamed, and I haven't streamed with it since. So I'm glad it's actually working, because you know, a lot of the stuff that we do on the stream is basically visual, both on the SEM and on the light microscope. And so for people who are hearing impaired, the closed captioning is great. And oh, there's these two guys. Because then they can, you know, they can follow along. And I've made my stream more accessible as a result, which I'm happy about. So I just sometimes forget to turn it on. I wish it was just automatic, but I've got to have a web browser open, and you know, like in my rush to get everything organized so that I can actually capture some stuff on the stream, sometimes I just totally lose track of the fact that I was going to turn something on. So that's an easy one to fix anyway, because I can just turn it on and then it'll start working. So that's nice. My slide's actually starting to dry out, and that's a consequence of, I guess we've been streaming for a little while, and So what I've been doing is I just have sort of a pipette here, and it's got a little bit of junk in it. So hopefully you can see that. And I'll just put a little bit more on, and it'll mess up the structure of what we have in the slide, but it'll also give us a little bit more time with whatever we have, and maybe I've introduced some more water bears or rotifers in the process, because I'll let these things sort of settle to the bottom of that pipette and squeezed out a little bit more good stuff when I did that. So it's very likely that I injected, oh, here's a nematode that wasn't in here before. So as an example, there's a little nematode worm squiggling about. Oh, let's zoom out so you can actually see it. There you go. And so that's kind of nice. Yeah, I can stream at a lower setting. Anakin, I can't change it while I'm streaming, and I didn't want to turn it off and turn it back on again, so yeah, I think you can set the intensity on your end a little bit too. So I can play around with that a bit. I know that people sometimes have problems with it basically choking out on their system. So if you have really nice, high-powered internet, it's going to look really sharp. And, we want that to happen. But I don't want to exclude people from seeing the stream or having it come across as being super choppy. So here's a little nematode worm squiggling about. Yeah. So there's one new thing. So this is what I saw the tardigrade basically trying to shove in its mouth hole one time. And I just started chomping on him. And I guess it was dead at the time. I think it started off dead. I don't think that the water bear had caught it and killed it, but I suppose it's always a possibility. Here's another little nematode. So whatever I put in, I brought in a bunch of nematodes that weren't in here. Here's a couple of these little guys crawling around. The rotifers. Here's another little wiggly nematode. So the nematode worms are also extremophiles. When the sample started, everything was completely dry and was on a stick, basically. Streamer has to do it, yeah. Yeah, I think the problem is that if it's running, I can't change the settings. At least I don't think I can. I think I have to sort of totally start the stream over to do that. Let's see if I can tweak it, though. Yeah, it's grayed out for me, so I can't change it in midstream. It won't allow me to do that. Probably the SEM streams are the same way. They probably also have an issue with fidelity for you guys sometimes, because in that case I'm streaming from the university and I've got a T1 connection or whatever, so. If the webcam doesn't have 60 frames per second, well, that thing up there has way more than 60 frames per second, and it has a webcam. It's a super high resolution camera, so that's not the issue that the webcam isn't able to hold up. Okay, I'll catch you later, Anakin. I will draw you something in SEM, I guess. This where'd the little water bear go? He was in this view. Oh, here he is. Here's one. Crawling around, as usual. The other day somebody asked me if I'd seen any testate amoebas, and in the sample I had there were a bunch of Arcella testate amoebas, which I found almost immediately after they asked. I think that was OpenSet that was asking me that. And but I haven't seen any in this sample. But those are also another organism that we come across in these samples quite frequently. Here's another water bear right there. That's a different species than the one that we were seeing before. That one's got like a little sort of antenna that come off of its face. You can see them very well when it's sort of in profile right there. Two little antennae that come off the side of its face, and then around its mouth it has sort of a sort of star-shaped opening, 5 or 6 little prongs that are on there. So that's kind of neat. Sorry, there was a follow and I missed it. Rachel Ray 11, thank you for the follow. I see Anakin Luke. Catch up with the things that happened in the stream a little bit later sometimes because, you know, like musicians or other people, it's kind of hard to look up at the chat all the time. Oh, there you can see it's got its corona out. Little cilia are spinning. And let me try to zoom in on that so you can get a good view of it, because those are really cool. You can see the little hairs associated with it. It can kind of pull them back inside of its mouth. You can get a really good view of it right there. So it's got these little tiny hairs around its mouth that it sort of wiggles around. They look like they're spinning, but that's actually kind of an optical illusion. They're just kind of waving around, and then you can see the particles kind of being drawn towards its mouth as a result of that right there. So it's a really good look at that. And then you can see it's got sort of a little chompy thing in its throat. That's the part that leads to its stomach. So I think that would, there you can kind of see when it stretches its neck forward, there's like a part inside that's kind of moving around. Right there, the mastax. And you can see how it can pull its whole mouth part system inside its head and pop them back out whenever it needs to. You didn't know that there were different species of water bears. In fact, there's something like 1,300 different species of water bears. There's quite a few. And they are all suited to sort of different environmental conditions. You can see there's a little tiny guy right here on this piece of lichen. So I haven't been talking about the water bear. I was talking about the rotifer for a little bit. There is a water bear right there. You can see him crawling. And by his movement and the claws on the end of his feet, you can tell that it's a water bear. In Indiana, which is where I am, here's another water bear, the big one's right there. So that's probably a different species right there. You can see how it's got like little sort of fingery things on the ends of its snout. Right there, you can kind of see those, I hope. So just around my house here at the local parks and things, I've seen maybe 4 different species of water bears, just from what I've found.
News,
Oh, thank you for the follow. That's Nukasek. Thank you. Bob Ross of microbiology. Yeah, I guess I sort of have a voice that people associate with him. Something like 4 or 5 different species that I've seen. So there's this guy with the big sort of antenna off the sides of his face and the sort of prongs. I've seen a smaller one that's like this. And there's sort of like a fat one that doesn't have any of those things on its face that I've seen. And the little guy that we have over there is sort of like that. And anyway, so I don't know the names of them. I'm not a water bear expert. I study diatoms, of course. But you can see those little doodads coming off of its face right there. But there's water bears that are adapted to living in very cold conditions. And there's sort of a water bear experts around the U.S. I think there's one of them in California that studies water bears in Antarctica. And they look for them in like criconite, these little sort of puddles that occur on the top of glaciers where dust settles in them, and the dark color of the dust basically causes the ice to stay melted. And yeah, I think it's 1,300 species of water bears. So there's a lot of them. Um, that number sounds really impressive. That there's more than 1,000 species of water bears. Just want to follow that up with there's more than 1,300 species of one genus in the of diatoms. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of diatoms. The species numbers for diatoms are estimated around between 1 and 2 million, like when it's all said and done. But we only have something like tens of thousands of them actually described. So maybe as much as 100,000 if you include every one of them. But the estimates are that that's a severe underestimate of the actual number of diatom species. So 1,300 doesn't seem like that much to me. But probably to the average person, that sounds like a crazy number, especially if you only thought there was one. If you only thought there was one kind of water bear, you'll be surprised to find that there's 1,300 species. But if you pick something like insects, there's millions of species of insects, and still a lot of that is cryptic. Like we don't know there's a bunch of insects that still are yet to be found. Yeah, that's a big boy, little Chook. he's well fed and he's happy right now. So your question was, how can you tell the different species apart? In the scanning electron microscope, their characteristics are pretty distinct, and I would actually argue that probably a specialist could tell you from light microscope for the most part. The shapes of their mouths, their heads, their coloration. Some of them, like this one, I think is armored. Like if you look at the exoskeleton, it's really heavy. Some of them have like a transparent exoskeleton. But like all things, when you're looking at trying to tell the species apart, there's a combination of ways that you could do it. You could look at them genetically and try to see how different they are genetically from one another. Or you can just look at them, like their body structure. And if you Google like just water bear SEM and look at them, there's all kinds of different water bears that you can find just from looking at things that have been imaged already, on an SEM or on a light microscope. And the characteristics that sort of set one species from another are, because they don't look like they have very many characteristics, but I'm guessing it's partly size and body shape. Like this is a big guy right here compared to that other one that's just a little ways away over here, is really quite small by comparison. So, I mean, here's the other one right here. It's just hidden behind that thing, but those two are immensely different from each other. It's possible that it might be a baby, but it's probably actually a different species. So, and then this, you can see the claw on the rotifer now really well. Like nothing wants to sit still, of course, in these settings, but yeah. So I think that's how they tell them apart for the most part. It's just basically body form, mouth parts, shape of the body, size, and coloration. So I'm sure there's a bunch of characteristics if you're an expert that such that they seem really different to you, whereas to us they probably all look very similar. So here's another water bear. I think that's the one that we had originally. It looks like it's on the same piece of junk as the other one, or close to it. And nematode, there's another water bear right there. It's not moving very much. Maybe we can get in a little bit closer on that one. He seems like he's a little bit slow. Probably still waking up. So the water that's on the slide right now is a little bit warmer than the water that's in the bowl, because the light coming from the microscope actually heats that water up, and it evaporates faster on the slide than it does in the bowl. And also, I think the little differences in temperature probably get the water bears to be a bit more active. So the ones in the bowl are mostly experiencing water straight from, our rotifer tap. So the temperature in there is probably pretty cold. Yeah, I don't know how people do this sort of stuff. With respect to finding them, they just go and sample all kinds of crazy environments, and that's how they find stuff. Similar probably to diatom work, where you're looking for um, diatoms living in weird environments. So, uh, but they're larger than diatoms, so in a sense, most of them are anyway. So in a sense, maybe they're a little bit easier to find. You could take a field microscope with you. Diatoms can definitely be endemic to an area, and in fact, I just published a paper yesterday on a new species of diatom from a lake in California, and as far as we can tell, it's endemic to just that lake. Um, I mean, we haven't looked closely at the surrounding lakes to see if it's possible that it's also in one of those, but it's definitely not a common diatom, and it's a new species. So, it's the first time we've seen that thing. Um, Maybe now that we know what to look for, we might, be able to find a couple of other places where it occurs. But at least for right now, we think it's probably an endemic diatom species that's new. And I described that species with a couple of my colleagues. So, hey Sarah, how are you doing? Um, Does a tardigrade which is adapted to extra cold temperatures survive at extra hot temperatures, or is it different species? So that's a good question, Mile. And I would say that people have sort of a mistaken idea about water bears being, because they are extremophiles, they think of them as being um, organisms that can live in really, really hot, really, really cold, really, really high pressure, really, really low pressure, like in outer space. But in fact, when they're usually in those really extreme conditions, they aren't active. They're in their cryptobiotic state, so they hibernate through those environments. And then, when they get to the other side of it, when the conditions go back to something that's a little bit more reasonable for them, then and they get wet, they come back to life. So they view that as having lived through that environment. So they'll take the water bear, they'll let it go dry out and form its cryptobiotic state. Then you could stick it in an oven in that state for 10 minutes. And some of them have been able to live in temperatures of 300 degrees or so for up to 10 minutes. And then they pull it out and put it back into water. And not only will it come back to life, but it will have offspring. And that's how they tell whether or not something is actually like capable of surviving through those conditions. Um, so, I mean, I think that there's sort of a range in their tolerances, and not all the water bears actually will go into that cryptobiotic state. It's not uniform across all the species. That they can all survive crazy conditions. Now, more appropriately, some of those water bears that live in those really cold places, like just on the surface of little puddles and glaciers, those things are adapted to those environments, and they're actually living in them when they're a water environment. When it freezes, when it goes back to ice, they don't move around, but they actually don't become active unless the temperatures are down to a certain degree, because they actually like living and being active in really cold conditions. Otherwise, why would they be living in Antarctica, where basically it would never get warm enough for them to really be active? So, for those types, they probably don't persist in really warm temperatures. They probably have a different sort of range. And I suspect it's really, really dependent on the species. So, however, if you find a diatom, or not diatom, but a water bear that can go into the cryptobiotic state, it's likely that it could handle being in really cold temperatures and being in really warm temperatures, and super acid conditions and very low pressure and very high pressure, because they test those organisms while they're in that state. So I think they probably could handle it. Um, it's a question as to whether or not many of them, like, when do they sort of switch into the hibernating state versus the more active state. So Pacific plankton has stuff and I have junk. Yeah. Uh, I just use the word junk whenever I don't want to talk about whatever it is. So piles of junk are on the slide. It's just stuff that's in my way. So it's like stuff, but it's in my way. I'm doing pretty well. I'm half lurking as I study for a final. Oh, well, good luck for that, Sarah. If you come by tomorrow while we're streaming, I can give you the sticker that you won. I have a whole bunch of them printed out, so I'll just let you pick from them live if you stop by. I don't know when your exam is, but if not, if you just give me some place where I can put them. I don't know where your advisor's lab is. I went looking around on the second floor and decided I didn't know where her lab actually was. So, you know, because this guy really isn't moving very much. We can kind of zoom in quite a bit and take a look at him. Stuck next to my giant melon over here, but you can really see the claws on the end of the feet right there, very readily, and you can actually see in that view right there. If you look at the claws, you can see that there's actually two sets of claws curled around down there at the bottom of its foot, and then a separate set of two claws that are kind of curled around, and they have like a counter, a sort of thumb for each one of those, so they can kind of grasp stuff and articulate them a little bit. And of course, unfortunately, it's not looking at us, it's looking away, but this one's not super active, and I don't know if those are eggs inside of it right there or what's going on inside of its body. It looks like maybe those could be eggs. They store the eggs inside their body like that. So, no problem, Mile. I just can tell you what I know, and that's about it. Which is, like, I read papers occasionally about water bears, and like I said, I'm not an expert. It's not like I can identify them or tell you anything about different species, other than I teach a class on extreme aquatic environments at Indiana State, and this guy had his little Corona out, and then he put it away right when I got him in focus for you.
Good news, everyone.
Hey, Moose does stuff. Welcome to the stream. Thank you for the follow. There's a couple of rotifers right there, side by side, and then another one over here. You can see the sort of green internal body component to them right there, which is, you're looking into their stomach. That's what they've been eating, which is this algae. They either pick it up off of the surface, or they just spin those little cilia around about their face and draw stuff in towards their mouths. And then, as I mentioned, they can kind of reject stuff or accept it and then chew it up and then down the hatch. So, cool thing about a lot of the metazoans, the tiny animals, is that a lot of them are transparent, or translucent at least, and so you can see what they've been eating, which is kind of cool. It gives you a really good sense of, what have they been up to. There's a little slow-moving nematode worm. You can see what they've been eating just right there, right through them. You can see how well they've been eating in some cases. And you can also see their eggs. So a lot of the translucent metazoans, you can actually see their, either they carry their eggs around outside of their body or they carry them around inside their body, and you can actually see them, which I think is kind of cool, because you can tell, oh, that one's getting ready to lay eggs, or its eggs are getting ready to hatch or whatever. And then, if you're patient and you don't have anything else to do, you could just sit here and watch them, probably. Lay the eggs and give birth. Have, in some cases, the water bears will molt, and then they'll just leave the eggs in the molt behind. And so that might be what was going on with that other water bear that we saw, because it looked like it had maybe eggs in the back end of it. And that's how they handle that. They will just, a lot of them will just molt, and then the eggs will stay in the molt as a place that's safe for the eggs to be, and or somewhat safe for the eggs to be, and they'll just leave them in there and then move on. So those eggs will just then hatch on their own. I've seen some videos on YouTube where a guy who was looking at them showed the mother actually sort of, in some cases, I don't know if they give live birth, but she had sort of bunch of little baby water bears around her. Sometimes their eggs look like these, or the rotifer eggs look like these little round things right here. I'm not sure what else those could be. They might be rotifer eggs. Suppose if we just sat here and stared at the eggs for long enough, or whatever they are, we might see them hatch or move around or something. But I didn't want to set up like a 12-hour stream where we just watch eggs. So let's not do that. I got stuff to do tomorrow morning. Getting close to the end of this side, and it's like all of the activity is really on the other end of this slide, which is kind of weird, especially considering I've added extra water to the slide, and I think I added it on this side. It's like this side has all the nematodes and that side has all the other things. Somehow just ended up that way. There's a big old nematode right there. Snake eating its own tail. Some of the things that we see, of course, because we're looking at 100x right now, this is 100 times magnification. Some of the things we might look for would be much smaller. So if I wanted to look for diatoms, for example, I might be able to see some from up here, but I wouldn't be able to see much of the detail. So when we're looking for amoeba or something that was a much smaller size class, we probably would need to zoom in quite a bit. Those are the things that these guys usually eat, though, so they've got to be able to fit in their mouth with respect to the sort of size differences between them. So rotifer, see, it kind of grabbed on with its face. Oh, you can't see it because I'm zoomed in again. Consequence. The biology office has mailboxes. Okay, well, I guess I could stick stuff in there. Do you pick up sticks with different kinds of lichens, search for water bears? Yes. So the one that I was showing on the stream before was just this stick here. That's the one that I took samples from the last time I streamed from home. I just happened to have it sitting next to this box. You can sort of see that's a really old stick with mostly sort of a white colored lichen on it. And that seemed to generate a fair number of water bears. And then I have, this is some bark, but you can kind of see there's a different kind of lichen on that altogether. It's like a green, what do they call that? Fructose or something like that, lichen with the sort of like blades on it. And it's clearly like a mossy green color. And that's just an old piece of wood that was laying on the ground. I find that that's been the most effective way of finding them, is not try to take them off a tree, but rather to try to get sticks. And this sample that we're looking at actually comes from this stick, so I should have had it with us. It's a little harder to see the lichen. It's kind of this white stuff in here. It's pretty similar to the type that's on that bark, but the tree type is very different. So you can see that it's got this, it's got this sort of rough textured bark. It doesn't seem to matter. I find water bears no matter what, whether I guess if you have really smooth skinned tree bark, I haven't been very successful with that yet, but any sort of rough tree bark with lichen on it seems to produce pretty good both rotifers and nematodes and water bears in those samples typically. So I haven't had any trouble finding them since I switched to that. When I first started, I was mostly just looking at I'm trying to shake that brown thing right there is Arcella. That's a type of a testate amoeba, and I don't know if it's actually living or not. I'm probably a little too far out to tell. Sometimes when they're living, you can actually see the little pseudopods sticking out, and they start sort of crawling around, but that little brown thing right there is actually an Arcella. That's a type of testate amoeba. So most people are familiar with just plain old amoeba that don't have any sort of exoskeleton. These ones make a little, I think that's chitinous material that's around them. And if we sit on it long enough, you might actually see some of the material around it start to sort of wiggle or move. They crawl very slowly, so you can kind of see like a little tiny pseudopods, and there's a bunch of bacteria on the slide as well. You can kind of see the bacteria there. We're zoomed in enough that you can see the bacteria, but you might see them kind of start to crawl if it's alive. And I'm not totally sure that it is alive, so I don't want to sit on it for too long, but let's jump back out to the 10x so you can kind of see the larger stuff in focus without me having to scramble around the sizes. If we find another one, I might try to zoom in on it. For some samples, they're all over the place, and I just haven't seen very much in this one that's like that. Just that one, for sure. So water bear, that's the one that we were seeing before. I don't think any of them are new at this point. Rotifers. Because we kind of looked around the whole slide. It's hard for you to tell, but for me, I kind of know we've moved up and down the whole thing once or twice, and picked out most of the stuff in here that's crawling around. So I've accomplished my goal for the evening, which is basically just to spend a little bit of time looking through the samples and giving people a little bit of view of some of this microscopic world. I think the next time I stream from home, oh, that's probably in a molt right there of something, a positive what. Next time I stream from home, I'll probably do some diatoms. It's nice doing things that are crawling around, so I'll probably do some living diatoms, but maybe I'll also mix in a couple of the samples from June Lake, which is where the species that I just described has taken up residence. And it might be sort of fun to take a look at a species that I've described and put a name on. I think that'd be pretty cool. Water bears are the best bears. Well, they won't eat you, so there's that. where did I find my sample? Sorry, Naziro. I found this sample at. I went out looking for birds at Hawthorne Park, which is like a local park here in Indiana, and I took a bunch of bird photos and I don't know, like sort of nature photos. And then at the end of it, I saw some sticks laying around, and I just picked them up from under a tree. And I recommend that if you're going to try to collect for water bears, that's where you start with a dead tree branch that has some lichen on it. A lot of lichen. The more lichen, the better it is. Probably likelihood that you'll find a water bear. And you don't. I mean, you want like dead sticks. I don't think you want to sort of take a live stick off of a tree, although it's totally possible. When we were picking out, so we got a Christmas tree. I don't think you can see it through the arch in the background behind me, but because it's not in that field of view. But we got a Christmas tree. We almost picked out a Christmas tree with some lichen on the bottom of it, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I like scraped a little bit of the lichen off of our Christmas tree and there was a water bear in it. I think that would be sort of cool, and then I could do like a Christmas water bear special. I don't think that tree has any though. I guess I could go look, maybe after the stream or sometime next week. It would be kind of cool to have like a water bear that I collected from our Christmas tree. So I'll give it a check and see if I can find anything there. And maybe that will be my stream sometime around Christmas. We'll look at some cool Christmas tree material. I don't know that I've looked at pine trees very frequently, or spruce trees. I think most Christmas trees are spruce trees. I don't think that I've looked at those very carefully for water bears. So that might be a really cool environment. It's a little bit different type of material. Most of the trees I've looked at are just things that we find in park, and normally I don't get very close to the bottom of pine trees, and they're kind of darker environments, but it might be worth it to look for them, to look for something different in them, by picking a different kind of tree. And I suppose if I get a little bit better at identifying water bears, I could try to focus on what kind of water bears I find in which kind of trees. At the moment, it's a little out of my league to try to do that, but I mean, I can kind of document, like, there's a big fat one and there's a red one, but you know. But yeah, Christmas tree microbes. That's my goal for Christmas. You know, some people want to get cool gifts. I just want a water bear under my Christmas tree in the form of a lichen. So I'm sure there's a song there somewhere. I'm sure that we can turn a Christmas song out somehow. And maybe I'll talk to some of my musician friends and see if I can convince them to do that. That would be funny. All right, so we're, you know, at that point in the stream where I probably should think about shutting things down, and going off and just having fun with the rest of my evening. But I do want to thank everybody for hanging out and taking a look at this sample with me, and also spending a little bit of time talking about extremophiles and water bears and rotifers and nematode worms and a bunch of things that aren't actually diatoms but that I am interested in, and hopefully you've been entertained by both the pretty pictures and our interesting dialogue. I'm going to look around and see if there's somebody that we can head off to raid. So that's a normal behavior for me at the end of a stream. And I'm going to mute this in the process so we don't hear something we shouldn't. And I think the place I want to go is, I'm just going to go find one of my friends. So I have a streamer that I've been wanting to raid for a while. She's playing a video game right now. It is Enceladsaurus, and so we'll give her a raid, and you know, we follow each other, but I haven't really spent a lot of time hanging out with her, and I sort of want to see what she's about. So she seems super nice. So here's the part where we do that, and I'm gonna, oops, type the raid command. If you did join late, Mile, of course these are all recorded, and oops, it didn't copy it. That sucks. Now I gotta go back. They're all recorded, and I have Amazon Prime, so they hang out on the video list for up to 2 months, and then some of them, the nicer ones, I often will move over to YouTube as well. So and I'll probably stream again with some water bears or whatever. Like I said, pretty soon, probably from the light microscope, maybe as soon as Friday or Thursday. From the SEM, we'll be doing that tomorrow from 1 to 3 Eastern. So you're welcome to come by and join us. We might do some sort of a sticker giveaway again for that day. I'll have some lab assistants that'll let me keep up with the chat a little bit more closely. So I should thank Moose Does Stuff, Nuka Sec, Rachel Ray 11, Scouse, Anakin Luke. I will get a drawing for you. Mile, Go Jules, and Geek Cuisine. And I think that's everybody that's followed us in the last hour or so. Oops. Network error. I don't know what that's about. So we'll just go ahead and raid. So thanks.